So I put in a proposal to have an exhibition in this space about 18 months ago. And this body of work has been made over the last 10 months, I would say. And in a sense, this is kind of the starting point, this body of drawings here. And I'm showing 56, call them echo drawings. These are 56 drawings from a series of 133 that I did. And these drawings come from a previous series, the 7x7x7, where I drew for 7 minutes every morning, every day of the week for 7 weeks. So I then use those as a kind of visual reference, and that original series is also called Meditations on a Sycamore Tree, and the tree is in my garden at home. So I kind of focused on noticing the same group of branches every day over a period of 7 weeks. So just kind of really kind of simple line drawings, in a sense kind of tracing the very slow development growth over a period of time. And I suppose sometimes I kind of see that the process of drawing for me is like a meditation, in terms of just kind of being still and spending the time being and noticing. And so these drawings here, I tend to kind of set myself quite kind of what might be seemingly narrow parameters in my projects. But then once I have those kind of boundaries, I can then start to kind of push against those, and it kind of allows me to quite a lot of play and experiment within what might be quite prescribed boundaries. So for these, I then took kind of at random 2 of those drawings and began kind of layering them. So for instance, this one here, it might be from the kind of 4th of May 2016 and the 5th of April in the same year. So it's quite a very simple system in a sense, and it means that if you work with very simple systems, it kind of allows you to kind of bring in elements of play and chance. And I kind of like that idea of playing with something that kind of appears to be quite prescribed and rigid, and also allows you to take some risks, bring in kind of nuances, play around with materials or the kind of qualities of line. Throughout my kind of practice, I suppose, at least for the last 15 years maybe, I use, I suppose, what you would call traditional fine art materials, obviously kind of graphite, different kinds of pencils, oil paint, but I also I've got a kind of perverse sort of interest in using materials or surfaces that you wouldn't necessarily align with a kind of fine art practice. So for instance, in the past, I've worked with upholstery, fabrics and materials, I've worked with wallpapers, I've done quite a body of work where I've been using wood chip wallpaper and kind of pricking around each of the individual pieces of it, which does sound very kind of bizarre really. But I like the idea of taking something that is kind of maybe a little bit awkward or a little bit kind of everyday, commonplace, mundane, or like wood chip wallpaper is a bit of a little bit kind of naff. And then trying to kind of, I suppose the idea of transformation, transforming something that is either quite kind of very familiar, very mundane, almost kind of so familiar that you don't really notice it. And then kind of doing something with it that kind of transforms it into something that is exquisite, beautiful, brings joy. So in a sense, when I started working with a 3D pen about 18 months ago, which is usually, it's a kind of children's craft toy. So children make things like, minions or kind of 3D house or, whatever the kind of their focus is. And it's a tool that is, you plug it into the mains, you get plastic filament that feeds through, and then it's a little bit like a glue gun. So the end of it melts the plastic and out comes this kind of liquid plastic. So it's quite awkward to use, and sometimes it splutters, but I quite like working with it because you have to sort of adapt your approach and your technique, the way it moves. You have to sort of be quite sensitive to and work with its kind of particular qualities. So this installation here comes out of the Echo drawings, but also as part of this exhibition I was invited to work with the Got collection, which is it's a historical collection of manuscripts, books, periodicals, and there was one particular book that kind of really drew my attention, and it's William Curtis's Flora Londinensis, which is it's a kind of late 18th century series of volumes. I think there are 16 in total, and I worked with the first 3 volumes, and it's very kind of exquisite book of botanical illustrations. So Curtis commissioned a number of botanical illustrators, and as I was kind of looking through the books, the root systems of these plants really kind of drew my attention, and it was kind of initially it was on a gut response, and I thought it was quite interesting that I'd been looking at and observing the branches and the leaves and of the kind of sycamore tree, and then to go back to the roots seemed kind of quite poetic in a sense. So I started drawing from some of the illustrations, and then I kind of interpreted those drawings from observation into the 3D pen. So I've got my Echo drawings from the drawings opposite, but also interspersed are elements of the root systems. So for instance, this one here is the root of a yellow iris, and there are kind of various other ones dotted around. This series of drawings, it's really very recent. I suppose I made these the first week of the new year. They relate back to the Echoes installation piece with the 3D drawings, and also back to not only the Echoes drawings but also the original 7x7x7 series. So there are some elements of the drawings that kind of relate to the research drawings I did from the William Curtis Flora Londinensis book. There's also some kind of elements of motifs from the original 7x7 drawing from the Meditations on the Sycamore Tree. One of the things I've been thinking about is my work's been quite monochrome for a couple of years now, and I've been thinking, very recently I've been thinking about trying to bring colour back into my practice. So it's a little bit of a kind of playful experiment in terms of using colour, but also still using a kind of simple system in terms of the hanging of it, and also the relating back to kind of using materials that are not usually related to kind of a fine art practice. So for instance, using Tipp-Ex pen, carbon paper, materials that kind of traditionally are associated with the stationery cupboard or the office, just kind of allowing the paper to kind of respond to the atmosphere, so it kind of curls and sort of, I suppose it kind of reflects that idea of something kind of changing slowly over time in a sort of tangential way. The series is called Root to Branch Carbon, because it kind of relates back to my original observation of the sycamore tree, and also the research drawings from the Curtis, the fact that all of these drawings, or parts of the drawings, are made through carbon paper, and obviously kind of carbon being a fundamental element of life. And I quite like the idea that the show reflects, each part of the show kind of reflects back at the other, and the idea of echoes in terms of the shadows reflect back. The shadows of the installation become part of the installation piece itself. Yes, there's a kind of sort of symmetry and maybe poetry in terms of the kind of the very simple ideas of mirroring, echoing, reflection.